We are on chapter 4, and we're starting at the top where we left off. Or possibly I saw an animal. She walked on hurriedly, sensing her thoughts. Bess and George drew closer to her. Nancy rounded the evergreen and saw that it hid a fallen-down, decayed summer house. She stopped short, struck by the realization that someone had been lurking there only a moment before. Those burning eyes had not been a figment of her imagination. "Now what do you see?" George asked in a low tone. Nancy decided to keep her secret no longer. In a whisper, she confided that she believed someone had been hiding in the summer house, perhaps watching their movements. "I knew we shouldn't have chosen this walk," Bess muttered. "It is haunted." "Haunted by a human being," Nancy said grimly. "I wish I knew who it was that was spying on us." There was no sign of anyone in or near the summer house now, and the girls heard neither the rustle of leaves nor the pad of retreating footsteps. "Let's go back to the car," Bess proposed suddenly. "We've seen enough of this place." "I haven't," corrected Nancy. "I'm getting more curious every minute." Not far from the summer house was a stone wall. It occurred to Nancy that the person who had observed them might have scrambled over it to avoid detection. She announced her intention of climbing up to make sure. "Don't do it," Bess pleaded nervously. "After all, we've no right to be on this property. Let's go." Nancy was not to be deterred. While Bess and George watched uneasily, she scrambled up the vine-covered wall. Weathered stone crumbled beneath her fingers. Before she gained a hold on the ledge, she slipped and nearly fell. "Do be careful, Nancy," Bess warned her. "There are sharp rocks just beneath you, and goodness only knows what's on top of that wall." Indeed, Nancy was in danger. Agile though she was, she did not have the strength to swing herself atop the wall. Her arms were tiring, and she could feel the soft rock loosening under the pressure of her fingers. "Can't make it," she gasped. George started to reply, but the words froze on her lips. Bess, too, was struck speechless with terror. On the ledge overhead was a huge venomous snake, its head raised. It was about to bury its fangs in Nancy's upstretched hand. Nancy did not see the snake. Bess was so horrified she could not speak. It was George who found her voice, crying out sharply, "Let go, Nancy, quick!" Startled, the Drew girl released her hold on the crumbling wall and dropped to the ground. Picking herself up, she gazed questioningly at the girls. "Just see what was making for you?" Bess quavered, still shaken from the close call her friend had had. Dramatically, she pointed to the huge snake. At sight of it, Nancy shuddered involuntarily. Though a bite from the copperhead would not have been fatal to one in such good health as herself, it would have been painful and required medical attention. "Oh, George, you saved me," she thanked her friend appreciatively. "I should have been more careful. Guess I better not climb the wall." "Those are the most sensible words I've heard you say today," Bess declared with feeling. "Let's get away from Haunted Walk before we find ourselves in real trouble." "Yes, let's go back to the car," George added. "I have an appointment in town anyway. It may rain." Nancy was reluctant to leave the estate without seeing Heath Castle, but she noticed that clouds were darkening the sky. "All right," she agreed, "but let's come back soon." They retraced their way across the creaking bridge. Try as they would, they could not find the right direction to the main road. "We're probably a long way from the car," George said finally. "I'll climb a tree and see if I can spot it." "Let's keep an eye out for snakes," Bess advised as she gave her cousin a boost up the trunk of a giant sugar maple. George was as nimble as a monkey. Climbing high among the branches, she shouted that the river was close by, the road far away. "We've wandered a long distance from the car," the girl reported discouragingly. George slid down the tree, pointing out the route that they must take to reach the parked automobile. "We'll cut straight through the woods ahead," she announced. "Are you sure we won't get lost?" Bess asked doubtfully. "Just follow little George." Nancy and Bess were quite willing to have her lead the way. She pushed confidently ahead, trampling down the high grass and thrusting aside thorny bushes. But as the going became more difficult, her pace slackened. I hope you know where you're leading us, Nancy said at last. It seems to me we're moving in a wide circle. George paused to catch her breath. Her gloomy silence confirmed Nancy's suspicion. George, are we lost? She asked. I don't know about you, the girl answered ruefully. Myself? Yes. It's going to rain any minute, too, Bess said, sinking down on a mossy log. Why did we come to this horrible, gloomy place? Imagine anyone building a home here. If the roads were opened and some shrubs cut down, the estate would be very lovely, Nancy pointed out. I'd like to live here myself. After resting a few minutes, the girls took vote on what to do and decided to continue on through the woods. Nancy was chosen leader and proved a better pathfinder than George. Before long, she came to some trampled grass. Now I know where we are, she cried jubilantly. We're near the estate boundary. A few 100 feet farther on, they saw the wall itself and scrambled over it, reaching the shelter of the car just as the first raindrops splashed against the windshield. Fortunately, Nancy was able to get to the paved highway before the side road became a mire of mud. Let's wear old shoes next time. Let me go to Heath Castle, she said to Bess and George as the girls parted company in River Heights. And take along snake serum, axes, and lunch, advised George pointedly. Alone, Nancy recalled that she had invited Lieutenant Masters to dinner at the Drew home that evening. At 7 o'clock, the attractive officer arrived, not wearing a uniform, but looking very feminine and pretty in a blue lace dress. As dinner progressed, Nancy knew from her father's chuckles and the quick repartee that he was enjoying their guest immensely. After a time, the talk became more serious. As mention was made of several famous court cases, Nancy brought up the problem of the Fenimores and the mystery of Floriana and Heath Castle. I thought that mysterious place would interest you, young Lieutenant Masters said, smiling. By this time, I suppose you've been to the courthouse, too, and read the Heath will. Why, no, Nancy confessed. So far, I've confined my investigations to the estate. Have you read the will? No, I've never had time to examine it. Why not do it together, Nancy proposed eagerly. To this, the policewoman promptly agreed, saying that 10 o'clock the next morning would be a convenient time for her to meet the girl at the courthouse. Since Nancy was familiar with legal terms, having read many of her father's papers, the Walter Heath document was easy for her to decipher. Hector Keep was named as sole executor. A quick reading confirmed the story that the entire Heath estate had been bequeathed to Floriana, also known as Flossie Johnson. In the event the estate was not claimed by her within 5 years of Walter Heath's death, the property was to go to the county for a park. One clause in the will held Nancy's attention. It read, "It is my belief and hope that Floriana still lives and will claim the property within the allotted time. She will be able to identify herself in a special way, thus ensuring that no impostor can receive my estate." I wonder what that means, Nancy mused, pointing out to Lieutenant Masters, who was equally puzzled. I haven't the faintest idea, said the officer. They went over the document again, but it gave no clue to the special means by which Floriana might establish her identity. Thinking that the dancer's sister, Mrs. Fenimore, might know the answer, they drove to her cottage. The invalid, her face pale, was sitting on the shabby front porch. She was trying without much success to patch a sunsuit of Joan's. Good morning, Mrs. Fenimore greeted the visitors wanly. She stared anxiously at the policewoman. It's not Joan again? No, it isn't. I'm happy to report that your little girl's behaving very well. We came to ask you a few questions about your sister Floriana. The invalid relaxed but spoke wearily. I'll tell you everything I can. Long ago I gave up hope that she will ever be found. Then you believe